let's talk parenting time, specifically parenting time as it relates to one parent wanting to not have the other parent have equal parenting time, as much parenting time as they have, or sometimes they don't want them to have any parenting time at all.
Mhm.
So I'm Taylor Casper. I'm the owner and managing attorney of the Wins Law Firm, where we help women navigating divorce walk through that process with confidence. Tell us about yourself, Rachel.
Yeah, I'm Rachel Kennedy. I'm the founder and principal mediator at Rachel Kennedy Mediation.
Cool. Obviously in our own work, but I think we've been doing a little offline talking about parenting time.
Yep.
Some more stories ourselves, maybe
Maybe a
me.
little.
And then like our friends, right? Like our other friends and people that we roll with and what's going on in their parenting time lives. And we see this recurring theme that parenting time is the big battle in the divorce and in the decoupling. I know been some situations where I'm talking clients literally off the ledge who are saying things like, I just want the kids, they can have everything else. They can have the house, the cars, the bank. I'm like, whoa, like, let's not throw away everything over this parenting time. Let's think about it critically. So I think people use, I don't know if you see that too, a lot of energy trying to like win at parenting time.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they show up and they're like, I don't trust her, so she can't have any parenting time. Okay, what are we talking about? You don't trust her like the kid goes to bed a half an hour later at her house, or you don't trust her like she's gotten three DWIs with the kid in the car. Like,
Yeah.
we kind of need some context for what it means when you say you don't trust her.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, absolutely. Like, what does that mean? I know I see a lot of arguments that people make about why their mother shouldn't have parenting time.
Hmm.
Things like, well, I've always been the primary parent. They're not going to know how to change a diaper or put a ponytail in her hair or cook them breakfast and get them to school on time or whatever the argument is. What are some of the most prevalent and maybe even some of the most outlandish, if I can say that, arguments that you're seeing about from one parent saying why the other shouldn't have parenting time?
Okay, maybe kind of an exaggeration, but they're like, he's harming our child. Oh my word. Why is he harming why is he harming your child? What does that mean? Well, I think he should eat organic apples and he feeds him Cheez-Its. Can you believe it? I can believe it. Most kids do eat Cheez-Its. And, like that's more of a values-based opinion. And you do you. You can prefer organic apples all day long. Honestly, I prefer organic apples. That's great. But that's not like gonna get somebody banned from parenting time. Or like similarly, you and I were talking earlier about maybe the one parent who favors essential oils and the other parent who favors the medicine from the doctor or something. Like both parents are doing their best. They're both trying to care for the child. Nobody is neglecting the child. Everybody makes sure that we have medical care when we need it. And it's okay if we as parents have different preferences on how we care for our child, as long as they are cared for properly and, healthy and dressed and going to school and all of that.
Yeah. So I think you hit on a couple things, right? There are going to be differences in parenting styles. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what you said actually goes back to the legal custody piece, right?
Right.
And the standard here in Minnesota is that two parents who are fit, generally fit, right? Not your opinion of fit, but just general, normal, regular, fit parents are going to have joint legal custody. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the situation where you're making decisions about health, religious upbringing, and education. And
Mm-hmm.
those are three giant buckets, right? Like I could have a certain opinion about whether or not my kids should be homeschooled versus going to traditional public schooling versus whatever, right? I could have an opinion that if you're suffering from pain, you should take ibuprofen versus somebody else who might have an opinion that if you're suffering from pain, you should go see the chiropractor or you should use oils. Like you mentioned that. That's a really good example, essential oils versus westernized medication. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's like all of these things. And what the statutes and the law will tell us is that one, reasonable minds can differ, but two, that if you have joint legal custody, everybody gets an opinion and a say on all of those things. Like one person doesn't drive the bus on organic apples versus Cheez-Its, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all of this stuff in there that's tied up where people are saying you shouldn't be able time over something that that parent has a right in their home to make a decision on. So
Yeah.
I think that's really an important distinction.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I had a recent one where the the dad was dating a new partner and it was pretty well established. They'd been together a while. He was going to bring her over to the house and the mom was like, "No, no, she can't meet the kids." And it's like, well, and they were in my office and the mom was really hysterical about the whole thing. And the dad was like, "What do you, we're well established. The kids know about her. I feel that I can choose that our kids will be okay if they meet her. I can choose what I do with the children while they're in my time, in my care."
Mhm.
Um, and she was really adamant. And you know, as a mediator, I can't take one person's side or the other, but I can say, are your kids cared for? Do they have their medical needs met? Do they have clothes that fit? Do they have food? Is there an adult there if they're too young to care for themselves? If all those things are true, and he decides to bring another adult into the home who is, we're assuming a safe, fit, adult.
Yeah, generally fit.
Okay. Yeah, right, right, exactly, exactly. And he's a loving and caring dad, and he's determined that this is a safe person to be around his children. If at some point we determine she's some terrible monster, okay, that's a different story. But we can go with the assumption that she's a generally acceptable human being, and dad has thought through the pros and cons and decided that that's an okay person to meet his child.
Yeah. And that's so good. It's like up to, you have to assume, right, that dad is taking this thoughtfully and considerately and he's doing his best, right? That's, I think, an
Right.
assumption that if a lot of people went from that place and then they still had an issue, okay, then your warning bells are going off with good reason. But
Right.
I think for a lot of times that's we're not assuming that, and so it drives the bus on whether or not we're saying that that's a situation where the other parent shouldn't be allowed parenting time. I see that one a lot. If mom's gonna have her boyfriend spending the night, then the boyfriend can't spend the night when the kids are there, or they can't meet the person or whatever, and it's been like a year. Or regardless too of your personal religious views, your personal background on how you think children should be raised, there's not a rule that says if mom's boyfriend spends the night that you get that parenting time. That's
Right.
not a thing. So I
Right.
not a thing. So I think maybe we should talk about what is a legal argument, or what would be something the court would take into consideration if you want to use a situation or a scenario to say that the other person shouldn't have parenting time or should have less parenting time, versus
Mhm.
what's not really gonna stand up on its own if you were to take that before a court.
Right.
Yeah, I think as far as what legally the courts would be looking for if you're saying somebody shouldn't have parenting time are safety issues. It's probably the
Mhm.
number one. That's
Mhm.
probably the number one thing. Are the children safe, cared for? You hit on a couple of really good things before when you were talking about it. Is somebody there supervising them when they're not, when they're not old enough to supervise themselves? Is somebody providing them with a meal? Do they have a place to sleep? Are they generally safe, secure, and well cared for? Right? Those are big things. So one argument I do see a lot that I think holds up well in court is one parent will say, why is he or she getting all this parenting time, and half the time that he or she has parenting time, they're not even with the child? That's a good argument. That's a
Yeah.
great argument, because if they're going to have parenting time, but for 4 or 6 hours of parenting time with a 5-year-old, they're not there, then
Mhm.
maybe the other parent should have just had the time, right? And we can adjust
Yeah.
accordingly. I think
Right.
that's a good argument I see a lot. People, I think, need to be really careful with drinking, or even smoking pot, right? Or taking gummies or whatever as a reason to withhold parenting time. The reason I say that is for a couple of reasons. If you want to never ever be able to drink a glass of alcohol with your children ever
Yeah.
again in your presence ever again, then you feel free to run right to the court and say they drink too much, they shouldn't be allowed to drink. Because the court's going to say, you
It's
think
on both
he drinks
sides.
yeah, he drinks too much, you think she drinks too much. I got a solution. Nobody can drink 12 hours before parenting time. You want to make sure I enforce that? Buy the breathalyzer that plugs into your phone. That's 300 or more dollars. Pay the monthly subscription. And
Mhm.
every time you have parenting time, you can blow right into a machine on your iPhone. and then you
Mhm.
guys can both never drink again. So I think be careful with that one too. Now, of course, if you have serious concerns, like somebody's been to rehab, they're getting DUIs, they're drinking and driving with the kids, and you can prove it, that's a safety concern. Holler that
Mhm.
out all day. But be careful what you ask for because it might come back to bite you. What do
Yeah.
you think about legal things versus non-legal things that people are putting forth with trying to withhold parenting time?
Yeah, I think I mean, like you're talking about, it goes back to safety. And even, okay, if we're going back to the example of like somebody has a new partner, like, well, I don't trust her. Why? I mean, because we all have feelings towards our ex-spouses. Let's just put that out there. It is what it is. So you don't trust her because there's some jealousy issues, or you don't like the way she looks or something, or you know that she has been convicted of some crime against a child. And so you're like, okay, legitimately, my children aren't safe there.
Hmm.
And, just kind of the other thing, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I have heard at times that sometimes people will even call CPS and do like an anonymous, like if this thing is going on,
Hmm.
like is this a thing? And probably if they have an attorney, maybe they would check with their attorney or whatever. But that's just another resource where those people who work with CPS can kind of be like, "Ooh, yeah, that's a bad deal. We want to look into that." Versus, I mean, it's cute that you're concerned, but it's just really not actually a thing. Um,
I super hate the calls to CPS and then the parents that use the police for like welfare checks on the
oh yeah.
children
Not
while the children are in the care of
that.
the other parent. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
first of all, CPS screens out so much, right?
Right.
Unless you're like, this person's beating my child. Um, I've had screened out, there's no heat in the home. They have the oven open to heat, and like there's like 2 and 3 year olds that live in the home. They have the oven open to heat the home in the winter because there's no heat. CPS screened it out. Um, I had I've had a lot of things CPS screened out. We could do a
Yeah.
whole hour of content on.
That would
But
be a
the
whole different
point
thing. Yeah.
is like think very carefully and critically. Like unless you think somebody has committed a crime against a child, is beating a
Yeah.
child, is taking other inappropriate abusive actions toward the child. One, CPS is going to screen it out. Two, your other partner is going to know it was you. Like they
Oh,
know,
well,
they all
I
know.
just meant more being anonymous because then CPS can tell you that's a
Oh, I
that's
see.
that's
Like,
not a thing that
yeah,
uh
we would
we're not gonna
never.
investigate that.
Yeah, we would never investigate that. Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think some people need to go back to just that safety thing over and over and be like, is
Right.
this a safety issue? Is
Right.
this a safety issue? Because obviously if you thought everything your partner did was great, again, like how
You
many
might
times do
still
we
be
have to say
married,
it?
right?
How many times do we have to say it, right? So, yeah, of course you're gonna have disagreement. Yeah, I think that legal custody issue and some things I think that are non-legal arguments that I've seen are like naturopathy and homeopathy versus westernized medicine. You both have a right to treat the child medically in a way that you like to have an opinion about that and to weigh in on medical care. And I've seen a lot of pushback from the spouse or the ex-spouse who likes westernized medicine against the spouse who's into like more natural remedies, naturopathy, homeopathy. What are some other things we've seen? Biofeedback,
Mhm.
chiropractic care, things like that. And the westernized medicine parent, we've seen a lot be like, they're withholding medical treatment. They are neglecting my child, and the child has a cold,
Yeah.
right? And it's like whether or not we gave the child Delsum or not, and
Yeah.
so I think sometimes that's one, which I hope I'm not offending anybody like in their westernized medicine, like whatever. And if I am, like I said it, I'll say it again. But
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? It's like this is not neglect. If you come from a place of, I assume my partner, my ex-partner, believes that they're caring for my child, do you think they would really try to harm them?
Right.
Even
Hmm.
if it's Cheez-Its. Yeah.
Bringing
Yeah.
back the Cheez-Its. Yeah.
Anything that like you think we didn't hit on here that people that you get a lot of or that people ask you about or things they bring to you that you think they need to know about this topic?
I would say, um, on kind of a larger scale, not necessarily a specific example, but I usually tell people, particularly when it's post decree, which is probably most of what we're talking about here, when, you're already divorced and you don't like if somebody's using, hippie herbs versus Tylenol from Target or whatever. Um,
I actually see a lot of it in the divorce proceedings where people have already separated
okay, yeah,
and they're
that's fair.
living separate, but the divorce isn't over,
That's
right? And we're
fair.
now we're like in this custody battle, right? And we're getting a custody evaluator and paying $8,000
Oh
over
yeah.
the Cheez-Its and the Deltham.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your
Yeah.
point.
No, I was just gonna say if it is, I mean, you handle it differently if you're still inside of the divorce process versus if you're post decree. But what I tell people, even when I'm working through the divorce, they're talking, sometimes they ask me, well, okay, what if we say this for the decree, but then we change our minds later or whatever? What I tell people is you really have three options in order if you don't agree with each other on whatever it is post decree. Number one, try to talk about it and like figure it out. See if you can just figure it out. Number two, go to mediation and see if you can figure it out that way. And then the third kind of higher option is to file a motion because I
Mhm.
can't even tell you how many times I've seen where people file motions and then the judge is like, "Oh, you're here to discuss whatever. Have you gone to mediation first?" No. Get out of my courtroom. Talk about it yourselves. Go to mediation. See what you can figure out on your own. If you can't figure it out, come back. I'll make a decision for you. You're probably not going to like it, but I will if I have to. But try first to see what you can figure out on your own. And that's kind of what I
Yeah, I
tell people
mean,
is like the progression if they disagree on
yeah.
stuff later on.
Yeah, and I don't know about your decree, but my decree says like we have to go to alternative dispute resolution
Right.
before we get to come back to the court.
Yeah.
So they don't want to see you running back over like whether or not the trail mix has peanuts versus cashews. They're not interested in that. So
Right.
the court does always have their eye towards what else have you tried? And you even now, which has changed since I started in practice, you now have to to the court that you've tried something else. You've tried to negotiate. You've tried, you file a certificate of settlement efforts. You've tried to negotiate. You've been to mediation. Or if you don't go, why it wouldn't be fruitful to go. And I've seen very few responses where the court's like, you didn't talk to them because they get loud with you when you call on the phone. No.
Yeah.
Like, try
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Like you're cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's super, super good. So I think the moral of the story for a lot of people is think really carefully about why you want to try to limit the other person's parenting time. Is it really a safety concern? Or is there maybe some trauma or some hurt or some unresolved something from that relationship that has you wanting to keep the child away, which is big for another video. But yeah, I encourage people to think about that and to really think about it in a way that's deep and meaningful before
Yeah,
they try to shut a parent out.
for sure.
And that's it. Another dive into the realities of divorce and co parenting. If you found value in this video, make sure that you give it a like and that you subscribe to this channel because the Wins Law Firm is here for you to make sure that you confidently navigate divorce and write that next chapter of your life.